Welcome to this breakdown, how I turned a single lyric idea into a release-ready song. If you're here, it's because you expressed interest in learning a little bit about my process. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into it, all within the context of my song, Real Friends, which depending on when you view this, may or may not already be released. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, if you want to listen to the song, it's located below or above this video. So if you want to pause this, stream it at any point, just to give you a little bit of context, a little bit of sense of what's going on, please feel free to do that. It should be located up or below this video. Okay, so some of you may know who I am. If you don't, I'm Connor Frost. I'm a musician. I'm an international touring artist, songwriter, producer, and professional songwriting mentor. And since 2019, I have helped hundreds of songwriters to write and release their first collection of songs. So yeah, welcome once again to this breakdown, how I went from a single lyric idea to a release-ready song. So here's what you're going to learn in this breakdown. Number one, the exact process I went from taking a single lyric idea of Real Friends to a release-ready song, why I chose the lyrics I chose, things I wish I had done differently. Yes, even after finishing the song, releasing it, I still have things that I wish I did differently, and a process to implement this all yourself, right? So the idea is I'm not just like sharing my process, I'm putting it in steps for you so that if you think it's cool, if you think it works, you can try this for yourself. So I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction of who I am, just so you have more of a sense of my story and my experience. So please allow me to introduce myself. So where I was, this was back in 2011 to 2013. I was a full-time middle school and high school teacher. At that time, I felt insecure and confused about what role music played in my life. I was comparing myself to other people that I went to college with. And so as a result, I just didn't really make a lot of music. I went through a stretch where I didn't make a lot of music. Eventually, I realized this is too important to me. So I started to invest in my music, started to hire producers and mentors, started to go on tour, release music, create content, and actually ended up leaving my teaching career to better position myself to do music. All of that led to some cool opportunities. Released music over the better part of a decade under my band's name, Dizzy Bats. This was from the years of like 2011 to 2021, still playing occasionally. Got to do these cool music video shoots for some of those songs. Got this really random placement for this ESPN Brazil web series for one of my songs. This was back in 2014 that got on this show. I mentioned I'm an international touring musician. Got to tour internationally, mainland China and Taiwan. This was back in 2018. I actually did this tour with my brother. Got to open for some of my favorite bands, Wunderbar. This was back in 2016 in State College, Pennsylvania, as well as Fred Mascherino, formerly of Taking Back Sunday, currently of Say Anything, getting to open for him. I think 2023 rather, getting to have these cool features. American Songwriter featured my band back in 2021. That was a really cool bucket list item for me. Doing this cool interview for POC and Punk. This was also back around that same time, and getting to be on some of my favorite podcasts, the music production podcast with Brian Funk. That was a few years ago as well. To creating my own podcast, Dear Songwriter, which charted at number 25 for music commentary podcasts a couple years ago. All of this leading to what I do now, largely in addition to making my own music, which is helping others to write songs, to confidently write and release their music. And so I have worked with hundreds of songwriters now directly to do exactly that. Online as well as in person. Over the last couple of years, we had songwriting retreats in Vermont, which is where I am currently located. Getting to help my clients like Neris go from just having words on a piece of paper to getting her first commercial publishing deal. This was recently that she was able to do that. Or like Antonio, who went from just being able to play like a couple things on guitar, a couple things on piano, to releasing his music, getting these cool features, getting these interviews, getting onto Spotify and building his brand, to even one night he walked into a bar in Philadelphia heard his own song playing, which was a surreal experience. And then even starting to perform at festivals. This was in Philadelphia as well a couple years ago. And then, client like Shantae, who, went from having just a couple words on a piece of paper, having trouble bringing everything together, and as it relates to how a song becomes a song, and leaving with her first 3 completed demos. Okay, now that you have a sense of who I am, what I've done, and what I do now, let's break this down. So step 1, going from a concept, just a lyric concept, to a release-ready song. Step 1 was to come up with a clear one-sentence concept, right? And for me, that concept specifically was, what is a real friend, right? This was something that over the course of the last few years, going through some transitions with my life, with my music, with my business, starting to think about, what is a friend, right? What is a real friend? So this was the clear one-sentence concept that I came up with. Step 2, once I had that concept, I wanted to decide on who the narrator is, right? Who the narrator was, AKA from what point of view are you, the songwriter, telling the story, right? So for me, I wanted the narrator to be the I, right? Just the I character, right? Very personal song. Didn't have to go far for inspiration. So I told it from the I. The next thing I did was decide on who your ideal listener is, right? So it's one thing to decide that POV, to decide that narrator, but I think a lot of times we as songwriters, we treat songwriting like it's just sort of this like therapy brain dump, right? It's just this like diary entry. We just start writing. We talk a lot about how we are feeling, the writer, how I am feeling, but we don't always consider like, who are we writing to? Specifically, who are we writing to? So deciding on who your ideal listener is really important, and actually asking and answering certain questions. For example, what struggles are they going through? How old are they? What is their gender? What is their background? What is their living situation, right? So literally in kind of the stream of consciousness journaling exercise, you can answer these questions, type it out, write it out, get really clear on who that ideal listener is, right? In business, they say you really need to know who your ideal customer is, right? What are what are they purchasing? Where are they hanging out? It's kind of a similar thing here, right? Not to put business with art, but it's kind of a similar approach, right? We're trying to figure out who we're speaking to. So what I came up with, I didn't have to go far because I related to a lot of it. What I came up with was a male musician in their 30s who just moved to a new city and is finding it difficult to make any friends. More specific, and the more info you have, the better, right? I think initially when I did this, I had a lot more information that I kind of brain dumped out, right? But this is kind of like the summary of what I came up with, right? So getting really clear on who your ideal listener is. Step 3, flesh out the original concept of real friend into 4 to 8 lines, right? This can be your chorus, right? So to take it a step further with this whole ideal listener thing, right? Thinking even more specifically, like, what is the language and everyday thoughts and behaviors that this ideal listener is using, right? What's keeping them up at night? What are the things that they're thinking about that they're too afraid to say out loud, right? So really like fleshing this out, answering these questions and using them for lyrics or potential lyrics, or at least ideas for lyrics for the chorus of your song. And I'll tell you why I answer these questions in a second. But first, this is what I came up with. So the lyrics for the chorus: who are my real friends? Where did they go? When did they leave? They didn't make my show. I'll call them one more time, phone off the line. It reminds me we never were that close. So going back, right? So the language and everyday thoughts, right? So thinking about these thoughts that this person might be thinking, who are my real friends, right? Questioning that. Where did they go? When did they leave, right? Maybe these are the insecurities that your ideal listener, right? What are those insecurities that the ideal listener is experiencing? and maybe they're too afraid to say out loud. And the reason I try to find that language, I try to figure that out, is because that's super powerful, right? To hear, if you're an ideal listener and you're listening to a song and you're hearing the thoughts that you are thinking that maybe you feel insecure about, that you're too afraid to say out loud, there's power in feeling like, oh, someone is saying these words that I've been wanting to say, but I can't. Someone is saying them for me, right? So really thinking about like, okay, what is the ideal listener saying? What are they thinking? What are the behaviors that they're feeling? And literally using that language. Hopefully that's clear. Step 4, outline your verses. Outline your verses. Okay, so when you're outlining your verses, what are you including? Number 1, setting. Number 2, tense, past or present, etc. Right? I think consistency in tense makes it a lot easier for your listener to be able to follow along with the storyline of your song. So if you're constantly switching tenses, that could maybe get a little confusing. And then a key transformation, right? So maybe this is a transformation of the character or the situation within the verse. Maybe it's verse to verse. Maybe the transformation happens in verse 2 or the escalation happens in verse 2, right? But really outline your verses, right? What I don't want to happen for me personally or for the students that I work with is for verse 2 to basically feel like a carbon copy of, or not even carbon copy, a variation of verse 1, right? I want it to feel like verse 2 is an escalation. There's a transformation involved. There's progression involved, right? So we're not just saying the same thing, verse 1 to verse 2, right? For each verse, I try to answer the question, what information do I want the listener to have by the end of the verse, right? So from there, I can kind of work backwards, right? I can kind of, what's the word? I can kind of backtrack. No, that's not the right word. Anyways, I can kind of work backwards. It's the word for it. I'm not thinking of it right now. So outline your verses. What I came up with as an example. Verse 1, the setting, New York City, Manhattan, right? I used to live in Manhattan, and then I also lived in Jersey City, which is right outside Manhattan. So setting, New York City, Manhattan. Key transformation in verse 1, going from wanting to be in a city and reminiscing about being in a city to wanting to be in the country. All right. Important information. Character is a musician and has moved out of the city, right? What are the details that I want to include? And for me, the listener being introduced to the fact that the character is a musician, that was important to me. Verse 2, the outline. Setting is a new home, living room. It's a cold winter day, right? So if you look at the lyrics or listen to the song, you'll notice this transformation. Feeling lonely, drinking, right? Is that key transformation? Important information. Character has yet to find friends, spending much of their time in solitude. And I'll show you the lyrics in a second, but let's first go to step 5. Step 5, flesh out ideas through stream of consciousness, journaling, then draft out 4 to 8 line of your verses, right? So once you have this information that you know you want to include, the transformations, right? The important information, the setting. Once you have that, flesh it out, right? I would recommend fleshing it out first, stream of consciousness, like don't even worry about lyrics, just get the details out into Google document, onto a piece of paper, get those ideas out. Once you do that, right, you can kind of go back into what you journaled and underline and circle certain lines, certain ideas that you think are cool. And then you can put that into 4 to 8 lines for your verses, right? So this is what I came up with. I'll give you a second to pause the video and you can read this. Okay, step 6. Now that you have the core of your song, I would argue that most songs have 2 verses and a chorus, right? So regardless of whether you have a bridge, a third verse, 2 verses and a chorus, I believe to be kind of the heartbeat and the core of your song, right? So once you have that, map out the structure for the rest of your song. So this is what I came up with. Verse 1, chorus, interlude, verse 2, chorus, bridge, chorus / outro, right? The chorus and outro are kind of melded melded a little bit together. Yeah, that's what I came up with. Step 7, repeat aforementioned steps to flesh out the lyrics for the rest of the song, then put together the melody and chord progression, right? Now, putting together the melody and the chord progression, that would have to be a whole other breakdown. But the idea is you want to repeat the steps to flesh out the lyrics for the other sections of the song, right? Verse 3, bridge, outro, whatever it might be. Okay, so let's do a summary. Step 1, I would type this out or take notes, put this into one sort of list here. Step 1, come up with a clear one-sentence concept. Step 2, decide on who the narrator is and decide on who your ideal listener is. Step 3, flesh out the original concept in 4 to 8 lines. This will be your chorus. Step 4, outline your verses. Step 5, flesh out the ideas of those verses through stream of consciousness journaling, then draft out 4 to 8 lines of your verse. Step 6, now that you have the core of the song, map out the structure of the rest of the song, or what I like to call the roadmap for the rest of the song. Step 7, repeat the steps to flesh out the lyrics for the rest of the song, the other sections of the song. Okay, things I wish I did differently. 3 things. Number 1, I wish I opened the song with a more compelling lyric to really grab listeners. So the lyric is, remember the times we meet up. And I think what I was going for was a sense of nostalgia, right? Remember the times, right? You know, the good old days, right? I kind of wanted to make it clear that this was a nostalgic moment. But I just feel like there could have been a better opening to really grab listeners. And I thought about it. I really thought about it. But at the end of the day, I think I just became so attached to that opening. And I'd thought about it from so early on that I just couldn't shake it. And maybe that's on me. Maybe that's my problem. But I'm at peace with it because I thought about it. But I kind of wish I did it differently. Spend less time on setting the scene in verse 1 and gotten to the point a little more quickly, right? So kind of in line with that first point, I feel like I was trying to maybe build that nostalgia through imagery, through details, and I think maybe I got carried away. If you go back to verse 1, if you listen to it, you can decide for yourself. Part of me feels like maybe I could have gotten to the meat and potatoes of the storyline a little bit faster, right? Because as songwriters, you really only have a limited amount of lines to work with, and every syllable counts. And so, I don't know, maybe I spent a little bit too much time trying to set that scene, and I could have gotten to it sooner. Added a second vocal part / lyric to the outro. So this is a little bit of a production note, I suppose. But in the very end of the song, when it goes back to, lines from the chorus, yeah, part of me wishes I added another lyric to kind of go run parallel or even counter to that final line, just to mix things up a little bit, maybe make that outro feel a little bit larger as we kind of end the song. I did try it. I ultimately found that I don't know, I couldn't get it right with what I came up with. And, short story is I kind of just gave up.